Before we dive into today's story, let's take a quick look back. In part 1 to 4, we met young Jeremiah, the reluctant prophet called by God to speak truth to a rebellious nation. Though afraid and unsure, he learned that when God calls, he also equips. Jeremiah faced rejection from his own people. The warnings grew louder, the resistance stronger, yet he kept speaking even when no one listened. His obedience cost him dearly. He was beaten, humiliated, and thrown into a muddy pit. But God sent help through Ebed-melech, proving that divine rescue can come from the most unexpected places. Then we witnessed a clash of truth and deception. Jeremiah versus the false prophet Hananiah. One spoke what people wanted to hear, the other spoke what God said. And in the end, truth stood firm. Now in part 5, Jerusalem has fallen. The people are scattered. It seems like all hope is gone. But Jeremiah's letter to the exiles carries a surprising message. God still has a plan even in the ruins. If you've been following this journey, thank you for walking through every chapter with us. Your support means so much. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode of this powerful biblical series. Because Jeremiah's story isn't just ancient history. It's a reminder that even in exile, God is still working behind the scenes. Imagine this. You've lost your home. Your temple lies in ashes. Every street you grew up on is gone, and the sound of your language now feels foreign in a land that doesn't know your God. Then one day a letter arrives. It's sealed with the mark of the prophet Jeremiah, the same man who warned your city to surrender. And the message reads, God still has a plan for you, even here, even now, even in exile. That's what Jeremiah sent to the Jewish exiles in Babylon. Hope in the middle of heartbreak. This was in Babylon, around 597 to 586 BC. Jerusalem had fallen. King Nebuchadnezzar's army had swept through Judah like a wildfire, destroying walls, burning temples, tearing families apart. Royal descendants were chained and marched hundreds of miles to Babylon. Merchants, priests, craftsmen, all carried off. Only the poorest of the poor were left behind. Everyone else was now in a strange land with strange gods and strange customs. Picture the exiles sitting by the rivers of Babylon, like Psalm 137 says, "We wept when we remembered Zion." They hung their harps on the trees because the songs of home hurt too much to sing. Every sound, every smell reminded them, this isn't Jerusalem. This isn't home. And maybe, just maybe, God isn't listening anymore. Then comes the scroll. A letter carried hundreds of miles from Jerusalem to Babylon. Inside were words that would shock them. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Seek the peace of the city where I have sent you and pray for it. For in its peace you will find your peace. Jeremiah 29 verses 5 to 7. Can you imagine how confusing that sounded? They were expecting a rescue mission. And God sends farming advice? But this was no ordinary message. It was a divine reframe. God wasn't absent. He was still working even in Babylon. Jeremiah's letter wasn't about surviving. It was about thriving in foreign soil. He told them to plant roots where they never wanted to be planted. To raise families in a land they thought was cursed. To pray for a city that had crushed their dreams. In other words, stop waiting for things to go back to normal. Start living faithfully in the new reality. That's not a message we like to hear, is it? We want quick fixes, instant change, a fast forward to the good part. But God told his people, settle in. I'm not done with you yet. And then, in the middle of this raw letter, comes the verse we all know. The one printed on mugs, phone cases, and church posters. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a future and a hope. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. It's beautiful, but let's not miss the truth behind it. This verse wasn't written to people celebrating victory. It was written to a broken people in exile. God wasn't promising an immediate escape. He was promising a future beyond their suffering. Imagine being told, "You will return home, but not for 70 years. Most of them wouldn't live to see that day. Yet God was saying, even if you don't see it, your children will. My promise doesn't expire. Hope redefined. That's what makes Jeremiah 29 so powerful. It's not about blind optimism, it's about faithful endurance. Hope in exile means keep living when life feels paused. Keep believing when nothing seems to move. Keep praying even when God feels silent. Because hope isn't an escape, it's an anchor. And maybe that's your Babylon right now. Maybe your exile isn't a physical one. It's emotional, spiritual, or financial. You've lost something you loved. You're surrounded by unfamiliar problems, strange seasons, and silent prayers. But God's message hasn't changed. Build, plant, pray. Don't wait for everything to be perfect before you trust Him. Don't put your faith on pause while you wait for a miracle. Even in exile, God is at work. Jeremiah's letter teaches 3 timeless truths. Hope requires action. The exiles were told to build, to plant, to pray, not to hide. Faith requires patience. 70 years means God's promises don't operate on our timelines. God's plan requires perspective. Sometimes the place you dread becomes the place God develops you. Babylon wasn't forever. But it was necessary. It was where God taught His people to depend on His presence. Not a temple, not a city, not a king. And when the 70 years were over, a new generation returned home stronger, wiser, and more faithful than before. So if you're in your own Babylon, if the future feels uncertain, the prayers feel unanswered, and the silence feels endless, remember Jeremiah's letter. God hasn't forgotten you. He's just planting you for a season where hope will grow deeper roots than ever before. Hope in exile isn't wishful thinking. It's trusting that God's story is still being written, even when you're living in a foreign land.